Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Jacob, the outspoken engineer. I am here today with Josh Griffin from the new HVAC new HVAC guide. Um, we've spoken before. Some Josh is someone that's heavily involved with HVAC in the States, in a certain part of America, which he'll go through with you. He's had his own HVAC company, and he is now involved with training and lots of online content for engineers. Purpose of this podcast, we have just had an election in the UK. The Labour Party has won. Keir Starmer, whether you voted Labour, Conservative, Reform, Independent, Green, you name it. What does that mean in HVAC? So Labour left seems to be a bit softer with net zero, softer meaning more for it. In HVAC, there's lots of conversations. What's going to happen? Are things going to continue to go to electrification? Well, in America, there is a presidential election coming up. But what's happened in America the last 2 years under the Democratic Party, which we'd probably say is the equivalent of the Labour Party, is things have changed drastically. So if you're an engineer in the UK, you've always seen the American aircon as really inefficient, blast furnace systems where they have boilers in the basement doing the hot water, and they're really inefficient. We call them dustbins with the air cooling through the dustbin type of systems, and we'd always say it's really inefficient. Energy is cheap in America, they can afford to do it. Little do a lot of people know that things have changed massively in the States, and we might have an indication of where we're going to go with the legislation that's being passed in the States. So over to Josh. So Josh, just because I've only summarized what you do, could you sort of elaborate for the audience what you do, how you've got into HVAC, and what you do with the new HVAC guide?
Yeah, my name is Josh. I host the HVAC Guide for Homeowners YouTube channel and also the HVAC Guide live show YouTube channel. And I used to own a heating and air business right up until a few months ago. Um, we weren't a huge company, but I had probably 12 or so employees at one point. Now I'm more involved on the training side of things. I work for a company that sells products to contractors, and I'm in charge of the training and support for those contractors, making sure they're doing things correctly and how to fix it when there's a problem. As far as as far as new HVAC guide, it's a website, newhvacguide.com, and we help homeowners through the process of buying a heating and air system. So we try to give them advice. It wouldn't do much for your audience because I don't know much about the way Europeans do things. But it's, if someone's here in the States or in Canada and they're navigating through the process of dealing with contractors, trying to connect the dots and understand the verbiage and all the other ins and outs of gathering quotes, comparing apples to apples, and making sure the contract says certain things and things like that. I've been in the industry in and out in one capacity or another for a couple decades. I've done other things. I tried doing. I went to school to be an electrician originally. I also hold a master's license for a plumber. So I know a little bit about a few other trades, and I love the HVAC trade. It's my favorite one, and for a number of reasons. And I'm enjoying what we're doing.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Josh, in the UK 5 years ago, in a residential home or a commercial property, the refrigerant that we would use in a typical aircon HVAC system would be R410A. That was phased out, and we are now with R32. And that goes to commercial water chillers and mainly all AC products. What we're seeing now, fast forward 2024, we're seeing a flooded aircon is still R32. There's a few whispers that we might be going R290, R600, which is a propane in split to multi-split units. What we're seeing in the commercial sector is propane being used in chillers. We're seeing R4517, R454C, almost I don't know. As an engineer, you see it as more low GWP refrigerant, but it also seems like a great big marketing tool to sell out these new refrigerants. No one really can pinpoint where things are going. So, first question for you is: 5 years ago, what was the number one gas that you'd all be using, and where are you today?
Uh, so 5 years ago, we were only 410A. So, and that was true right up until last year. So we seem to be on track to be about 4 to 5 years behind you folks, and we are introducing two refrigerants to our market when it comes to residential. So the manufacturers themselves are required to go to a refrigerant of 700 GWP or less. Some of those manufacturers are going R32. Some of those manufacturers are going with R454B, which is a blend of R32 and 1234YF. Um, I have my concerns with uh, both refrigerants, really, but one in particular. I don't know how deep you want to dive into that, but
So just to confirm, Josh. So are you saying that because now in the States you're having a lot of split and multi-split units as well now, aren't you?
yes, yep, yep,
Is
yep.
R454B being used in splits and multi-splits?
That's a good question. Right now, I'm not aware of any, and so there are brands running around doing YouTube videos and classes saying this is the better refrigerant. It has a lower GWP. What's interesting about it is it does have a lower GWP if you're comparing 1 pound of it to another pound of, say R32 to a pound of 454B. However, the capacity required of refrigerant to get the same cooling is higher. So because 454B is predominantly R32, it's almost 70% R32. If you were to compare two systems, say an R32 system that holds 6 pounds of refrigerant to a 454B system that holds 9 pounds of refrigerant to both reach the same capacity, if they both leak the refrigerant out into the atmosphere, they both just release the same amount of R32. So it's an odd argument to me that it's just because it has a lower GWP, and it has some pros and cons. I've done some other content on that, but
So so so
overall,
so
it's
R454
interesting.
yeah, so R454B it reminds me of what we had a gas in the UK called R407C. So when we
Uh huh.
banned R22, someone brought out R407C, a certain manufacturer, and it was R22, R134A, and then there was another one. And if you ever had a leak on the system, you had to dump the whole refrigerant charge because you would lose parts of a certain refrigerant. So it ends up costing you more. And in terms of leaks, they seem to leak more blended refrigerants. It's something which I thought we'd never go back to, but it ticks a box where it comes to low GWP, but it doesn't tick the box where it comes to stupidity, because there is that stupidity box which no one seems to look at. So are you seeing that? Do you think R454B could stick in the States in splits and multi-splits? Or do you think R32 is going to be the number one go-to?
Well, I think that I think I've heard you hear stuff, right? You hear 10 different stories from 10 different people. I do think that both will eventually be phased out. That it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that. What's interesting though is what is that timeline going to look like? And some are saying that the EPA, which is the organization that sets all the rules for us here in the States, that they're going to gradually drop the GWP rating, meaning within the next few years, R32 could be ruled out, despite the common sense that I just, shared with you about them both leaking the same R32. But if that's the case, we could go to a point where 454B is our only option here, I would be very surprised if that happens. But we'll see. I think that they both will need to get, if we're going to move on to the next phase of refrigerants, they both would need to go simply because they both hold the same amount of R32 ish, you know, typically. And it'll be interesting to see how all that goes.
Well, when R32 come out, I was actually I was a bit of a critic because I was like, it's exactly the same as R410A. Same criteria, is a slightly higher discharge temp. But where R32 is where I would now bow down and say significantly better than R410A, if we have a split system which has, say, 2 kilos of R410A, there's probably about 1.4 kilos of R32. So on a stupidity factor, if that system leaks, you are leaking less refrigerant into the environment, which really we should be looking at, using less rather than using more but having a lower GWP. Otherwise, we're going to have systems with loads of refrigerant and an atmosphere which, you're going to be leaking twice as much lower GWP refrigerant than you need to be. So designs, how are the designs looking in the States now? So are you seeing new products? What, are you stepping away from the furnace model? Are you involved with splits and multi-splits? Where's the market for you at the moment?
So we're all over the place. You can still get your hands on what we would consider antiquated technology during this conversation. There are states themselves that are trying to move the needle along, um, locally. So they're trying to do things like rule out low AFU rated furnaces, what we would call non condensing, low efficient furnaces. So they're trying to do things like that, but there is overall a push for electrification. There's a push for these lower GWP refrigerants, and that push is mostly at the government level. It's not by contractors. It's not by the organizations or lobbyists that revolve around the contractors typically. And I think the manufacturers, unfortunately, are just along for the ride. They're trying to make as much money as they can, regardless of which we go. But there is an overall push even from the manufacturers, just so they're singing the same tune of where they believe the future is going. So you do see some of the manufacturers saying things like, we've got the next wave of technology, we've got the next product you need to look at when it comes to electrification. And there's other incentives at the government level as well. So we have something here called the Inflation Reduction Act, where they introduce some programs where if a homeowner were to say go with a higher end system, then they would get some sort of tax rebate or incentive.
Okay. Interesting. So at the moment, if you've got an old type of furnace in your home in America and you want to upgrade it, what potential design options is somebody going to give me? Like, how am I going to heat the water in my house if I want to electrify my house? Are you onto air to water heat pumps in the States now?
We're not, but we're hearing rumblings. And in fact, that is, I think, a part of this, right? So if we do go to isobutane or propane as the refrigerant moving forward, 600A or R290, I think it's going to be a little easier to digest for homeowners if that refrigerant was completely outside of the home, if it were to leak out. Uh, it it's it's still, we're a long ways away from being able to mass sell air to water though. I've done classes talking about this change from 410A to A2L refrigerants, and the contractors themselves have said things like, well, I'm going to figure out the loophole to continue to sell low efficient equipment, because that's ultimately what I believe my customers want anyway. So
We
it's
Josh,
funny.
so
It
10, I'd probably say 10 years, maybe 13, 14 years ago, when we stepped away from fixed speed compressors and we went to inverters, I was like a bit rebellious like that, where I was like, oh, if customers want a cheap replacement fixed speed unit, I'll get them one, but it'll stop. It just does. It naturally fades out. In the UK at the moment with air source heat pumps, it is, I'm going to use the word bananas, because So we recently we were at a show. It's called the Installer Show in the NEC, a big conference center, and it was basically plumbers, a bit of aircon, a lot of HVAC. There must have been 30 heat pump air to water companies, a lot of Chinese products rebadged, all the top hitters out there selling their products. There's quite clear not enough installers from talking to people. There's not enough people trained, but as you rightly said, it's an opportunity for manufacturers to sell these boxes. The market is just flooded. Like, I just couldn't believe. I've never seen it. Like, it's and then and then there's design questions. So you have some people designing these air to water heat pumps differently to other manufacturers, and there is no right or wrong. And then the air source heat pump installers are at war with each other, saying you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. Here at the moment, there's more heat pumps than there are people to install them, but there's still that number one question on, cost. It's still very expensive. To replace a gas boiler in the UK, you're paying between £1,500 and £2,500. To replace your air source, to replace it with an air source heat pump, you're looking at about £10,000. So, again, to me, the stupidity radar says, you could put yourself in a bit of poverty here, all in the name of, reducing your personal carbon footprint. I think it's going to arrive your side, Josh, sooner or later. I don't know how you yourself and your colleagues can prep. I know you do a lot of stuff with Daikin in America, in the States. Is there talk with them? Are they going to start selling their, have they mentioned air to water heat pumps in America? Is this where you're like, I can't say anything?
I have been privy to some really cool conversations of things to come. I'll just say that.
Okay. We've recently had a new product come out, Daikin in the UK, and Mitsubishi Electric have got one coming out, which again is another headache, where it uses a multi-split condensing unit, and you have air conditioning units in the rooms, but one of the ports you have a water cylinder, and it goes up to 180 liters. So if you have a 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom apartment, you can have air conditioning and hot water just from a multi-split condenser.
Oh, cool.
Have you heard of that before?
That would be new to us for sure. I have not heard of anything here quite like that. I'll tell you the other thing that's new for us. Now, well, let me ask you this before I go through this. You guys don't have, I know it's not as predominant, but do you guys have any ductwork at all? Like if a customer wanted a duct system, what we would call a conventional central air system?
Yeah. So we do a lot of these. So if a client wants heating and cooling in the top floor of their house, we can do a ducted system, or we put it in there, what we'd call, the loft or the attic, and we could run the duct in to do the first floor. We can do the ground floor, but only if the house is being built. To retrofit is pretty impossible. But we don't do a, like, do you mean like your furnace system where you have it in the basement and it has a high powered fan that pumps through the house? Is that what you mean?
Yes. Yeah.
We don't have them, no.
Well, so we're seeing another thing we're seeing here is as the ratings continue to, the minimum ratings continue to rise. So last year, was it last year? 2 years ago, they came out with SEER 2 ratings here. And so they said all systems needed to be above a certain, depending on where you live in our country, above a certain SEER 2 rating to meet these efficiencies. And so one of the things I'm seeing is there are brands coming out with these non-communicating inverter systems. So a big thing here in the States is they like their thermostats. They like their Nest or Ecobee or Sensi or Honeywell thermostat. So they don't want a proprietary communicating thermostat that could cost them, several $100s. They want to be able to go to a local hardware store and buy their own non-communicating thermostat. So there's multiple brands, and I do think we're going to see a shift here in the States over the next decade, because we're already seeing multiple. If you go back 5 years ago, as far as I knew, Bosch was the only brand that offered that. There might have been one other out there, but now I'm aware of at least half a dozen brands that offer a non-communicating inverter system. And I think it's only a matter of time before some of the big players start to look at that as well, because they need to have some sort of a budget friendly option as these SEER ratings continue to rise.
Interesting. Interesting. So that's the manufacturers adapting to the requirements for the customers in where you are, to say, for us to adapt this, we need something that's non-communicate communicating, right?
Yeah, they're trying to make money, but also have, a more budget friendly option compared, a communicating inverter system air to air is going to be, you know, in some cases, some states here, 20 grand, depending on who the contractor is.
For anyone, just to confirm, Josh, so I'm right on this as well. So for anyone that's a bit doesn't understand the terminology, in the UK, if you've got a single packaged, we call it a packaged unit with a simple thermostat which switches the unit on and off through ducting, this is exactly what Josh is saying. But when we're talking about a DX unit with a branded internal unit and an external unit, where it needs to communicate, that's where we're talking about the communicating type. So what you're saying, Josh, is it's a case of ripping out an old bit of technology which is inefficient and replacing it with an efficient packaged unit with an external thermostat, right?
Yes. Well, it doesn't have to be packaged. It can still be a split system. I'm only aware of one packaged unit, which again, Bosch offers at this moment, that has that technology. But at the end of the day, it's not that revolutionary of a technology when you consider how mini splits work. A mini split technically has a non communicating controller, a remote, or some other type. And then you have an indoor and outdoor unit that can communicate between the two. So it's not that revolutionary. It's just interesting to see some of these brands offer these products larger, in a central air style.
So, legislation wise, that's one thing I want to touch on with you. So, um, and also attitude. So, legislation can drive the attitude of engineers. And in the UK, if you're an AC installer, you're quite familiar now with R32. If you're service or you're technical and you're seeing all these different refrigerants and different system designs, you can sometimes lose faith in the industry, lose faith with the future, lose faith with what's going on. What have you seen? I know you've mentioned SEER 2, and I know on your channel you've mentioned new refrigerants. Um, I, is it, where is information being fed from? Is it from manufacturers? Is it from gossip, where people are just talking in the States? But, where is legislation taking you? I know you've got an election coming up in November, and, if it's Trump that comes in, you would have thought he would be a bit softer on the net zero. But versus Biden. But where is legislation going at this present moment?
Well, to answer your first question, the distribution of information has always, I think, been a problem. And so it's mostly coming from the manufacturers here. So they're the ones that will push out information. Now, there's exceptions to that rule. There's times when a website might post, say the EPA might post a blog or something that goes over some new changes and things like that. But ultimately, when the public is being fed this information, from what I've seen, it's predominantly the manufacturers that are going to say, "Hey, we've got this change coming. Here's some new products, etc." As far as the uh, changes in legislation and all of that, I mean, I think you've pretty much nailed it. I think, depending on who is voted in on the next election, I would say that Trump probably has other priorities. He probably this would be far down his list. I try to stay as neutral as possible on my YouTube channel. I know you and I have had some conversations when we're not on the air, and some of the things that we agree on or maybe don't agree on. But um, ultimately, I think that the writings on the wall. I think right at this point, regardless of who's elected, I think we're going to see this gradual change, right? We're already 410A is going away in our country. They call it a phase down, not a phase out. But I've always said that this whole thing with our industry is sort of like that first date with your girlfriend. You've got to hold her hand before you kiss her on the mouth. And so they're not going to kiss us on the mouth yet. They're not going to scare us. They're not going to say, "Hey, 410A is completely gone tomorrow and here's some not, flammable refrigerants." They're not going to do that to us. So they're going to say things like phase down, and they're going to say this is gradual, and all of these ways of making the American public be okay with it. But regardless of who's elected, we're definitely going to see 410A go away, and I think it's probably easy to say that within the next handful of years we'll see another increase in what the SEER ratings are going to be or need to be sold in our country. And I'm also being told that with the them introducing these new refrigerants to our market, that we're going to see new technologies. And I think you tech you touched on them earlier on what some of those might be, but we're going to see new products that Americans have never seen to introduce to our country, and it'll be fun. It's going to give me a lot of content to do on my YouTube channel, so I'm okay with it. But
Big difference immediately, which and I've read it and I've seen people comment, and it's so true. One of the thing that you've done right in the States versus the UK, our houses in the UK have always been too small. Like, some of the houses are tiny, so where you have splits and multi splits, it's perfect. But predominantly all houses in the States, I know you'll probably get some small houses in the States, for goodness sake, but you have seen a typical 3-bedroom house in the States is probably twice the size, if not 3 times the size of a 3-bedroom house in the UK. And because of that, I think certain products will never work in the States that we have here, because it just doesn't work. You need your air system, your forced air and your ducting for that. But yeah, it sounds like you've got as much uncertainty as we have, really, where things may go.
I think well, and again, I think it's got to be gradual. So I have folks, they'll comment on my videos and they'll say, "Well, why don't they just come out with stop doing this and just go ahead and switch to the refrigerants you're going to switch to?" And I'll say, "Okay, well, if you want that carbon dioxide system, that CO2 system that is zero net and AI technology and all the thing, and we're going to slap solar panels on your house, and we're if you want it, we can figure out how to get it for you, but it's also going to be $500,000, you know."
Out
So
of, out of 100 clients, you probably find 5 of them would probably go for that. We do have that. It's quite crazy, really. I know it's a bit off topic, but we do have some clients in their like 80s that want to go down that route, and we're like, your payback is like 20 years before you get your money back. But I think they want to do their bit in reducing their carbon footprint. But yeah, very interesting. Where do you think the next 5 years goes for the States with technologies? Have you got if you could close your eyes and open your eyes and it's 2029, where do you envisage where things may be?
well, I think AI is going to play a big role over the next decade. I think that we're going to see some really cool products on that front. In fact, I do a goofy invention segment on my live show that you may be a guest on soon. We were just talking. The time zone has always been a concern for me, but it sounded like maybe it wasn't as big of a concern
No
for you.
issue
So,
for us whatsoever. No issue for us.
uh, but I've had some goofy inventions revolving around that. Maybe some technology that can, because we already have mini splits that can see you in the room and split the air, right?
Who?
And
Whoa,
so
whoa,
have
whoa,
have
whoa, whoa! What have you? Who does that? Who does who? Because we have that. We've had that for some time in the UK. What brands do that?
um I mean, I don't want to be misquoted, but most of the big mini split brands here have some sort of products that have that.
So in
Um,
the UK, they can have a like a funny looking globe on their units, which is called an eye sensor. So if it doesn't detect movement after like 8 minutes, it shuts the unit down for efficiency. We have Mitsubishi Electric. They have a wall mount called the LN, which basically detects heating the room, and it has four louvers. It's like the unit is split in half, so it can send cold air to certain parts of the, where the heat is. I don't think it's smart enough to, it's not as smart as we think, unless, well, maybe you've got products in the States which are a bit smarter than what we have out here.
I highly doubt that. We probably have an elementary version of what you have, but the goofy invention I came up with was having some sort of AI that would thermally sense you and say, Jacob just came in from a run. He looks like he's perspirating. He looks like he's a little hot. We're going to lower the humidity, but also raise the cooling and make him a little more comfortable and be able to, you won't even have to change the temperature. Have some sort of technology that could, I don't know. I'm being crazy.
Don't have anything that complex out there, but we have got some systems similar, like home systems, which, um, if you've got a Samsung unit and you've got a Samsung fridge freezer and and all of that. Actually, no, let's look at a different product, Heya, which is a Chinese brand. Heya have got really highly sophisticated refrigerators, which can monitor the, if you've got a piece of fruit in your refrigerator, or we'd call your fridge, it learns how old it is and whether or not it's good to eat or not. And it also knows what's in your fridge and it can give you menu suggestions. It's very scary, but that can speak to your aircon, which will then learn you. The only thing with what you just said with your goofy invention is, oh man, it's like human beings are just getting so soft. Just open a window. Like it's but unfortunately people do not do that anymore. People they want it done for them. Yeah, what goofy invention would I have? I don't know. One invention or something that I would suggest straight away is, if you're a commercial business or you're a home, a domestic property, with R32 and R410A, well, R32, most manufacturers, they have a certain quota that they're allowed to bring in. You can only have a certain amount of R32 in as a manufacturer, and that's something that you're going to find. So I would say that every single individual person has a certain amount of R32 or refrigerant allowed for them. So if you've got an office with 10 people in, you can only have a system with a certain amount of refrigerant, because that gets around the idiot, the stupid tick, because then it restricts you having oversized systems. That's a suggestion that I would. It's not necessarily a goofy invention, but it's just a bit of sensible legislation.
We have with these A2L refrigerants coming, one of the things that they're requiring by code is these sensors that if the system holds more than 4 pounds of refrigerant, that the sensor will go into a mitigation mode if it senses a refrigerant leak, and the indoor fan motor will continuously run to push the refrigerant. Do y'all have that?
So commercially, so residentially, if you have a floor mounted unit, if it leaks, it has a built-in refrigeration detector and it'll stop the unit working. But commercially now, where all units are R32, we're having to put very expensive leak detection systems in. Daikin have a product called the VRV5, which has a built-in extract fan. So if it goes into an alarm, it actually dumps the refrigerant through a piece of duct to outside. You're going to see this in the very near future. I'm sure you are. And then what happens is you say, well, it's cheaper to put in an R410A system than an R32 system with leak detection. But then the consultant says, no, it has to be R32. And you're like, okay, double the price. And they're like, who cares? It's R32. It has to be R32. That's something that we've had for a little while now.
Interesting. Yeah.
Wonderful, Josh. Well, I've got all my questions covered for you today. Have you got anything for us?
I think you answered mine as well. I was curious on where things are going over there, and you guys are always a little ahead of us, and it gives me always a little glimpse. It's almost as if I can just kind of peek into the future just a little bit on what we're going to see, because when you do find out where you guys are heading, I would almost guess that we're going to be right behind. If you guys find out tomorrow that, yep, R290 is where we're switching, it's time to make the leap, then I'll know. I'll know that it's here we go. Here it
Well,
comes.
Josh, R32, I thought it was only going to be here for 3 to 4 years, but I think it's going to be here for at least another 5 years. It's been here now for about 4 years. It's going to be here for another 5 years. R290, the only downside of R290, and this is true, by the way, so it's a fact. The lower the refrigerant number, or the lower the GWP, the less efficient the unit becomes. So R290 in a heat pump is actually less efficient than the R32 version, but it has a lower GWP. And it goes back to that stupid thing, R32 being 675, and then R290. R290 is 0 GWP because it's a propane. But it's less efficient. And it's kind of, well, I'm happy to have something less efficient if it's a GWP of 0. We're still a while away from that with splits and multi-splits, in my opinion. I think we're 5 years away from it. One thing that I think is going to happen in the States, which has happened here, I think air-to-water heat pumps are going to... I think we're going to have this conversation in a year or two's time, and you're just going to go, what happened? This is nuts. No one knows how to install these. All the manufacturers are trying to train everyone, and then all the plumbers and heating engineers are like, I'm not a fridge guy, but they just learn because what they do is they go in the fridge course, but they don't need to be fridge engineers because it's a packaged unit with a flow and return. I think that's when that happens out in the States, you're going to be like, this is bananas, because it's bananas here. It really is bananas here.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So let's wait and see. Well, great to talk to you, Josh, and I'll catch up with you on your podcast soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I'm excited.
Thanks a lot, Josh. Thank you.